voice to overcome that struggle?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to point out the president is not taking this election for granted, and candidates shouldn't. I hope Democrats are nervous. I think that's more consistent with how people are feeling in the general population. And I think the question is, do we want a government that is on the side of helping people help themselves, or do we want a philosophy, which the National Republican Party has been pushing anyway, which says that everybody's on his or her own? I think at the end of the day, the American people are going to choose a partnership with leadership in the form of President Obama, which is about helping people help themselves. And the jobs bill is just the most recent, and I think very important.
What is he doing, though? Is this a base strategy? Is that where you think the president finds his voice?
You might be asking the wrong person, because I don't do all the strategies and all that stuff. I think the president is about trying to make sure that every American, regardless of party, those who see themselves as Democrats or Republicans or don't see themselves as aligned at all, understand that he is on their side, and with this jobs bill, he can help. We can help.
Governor McDonnell, rhetoric matters, and the president is in a new phase in terms of how he takes on Republicans. Earlier last month, he sat down with our own Brian Williams, and when it came to responding to Republicans, this is what he had to say.
I'm not going to start reacting to Republican rhetoric in a presidential campaign. Let them decide who it is that is going to be their standard bearer, and we'll have more than ample time to have a debate with them.
He was at 35,000 feet. Now he's down at the tree line, right? This is what he said just this past week at a fundraiser out west. The president saying, I mean, has anybody been watching the debates lately? You've got a governor, he's talking about Perry here, whose state is on fire denying climate change. He's engaging Republicans. He's calling them out by name. He must like the comparison.
Well, all eyes, of course, are on the Republicans. There's no competition on the Democratic side. Not for now. There may be if things don't get a little bit better. But look, this election's about three things, and the Democrats are on the wrong side of it. It's about jobs and economic development, sustained 31 months now, over 8%. President promised stimulus would get us under 8. We're at 9.1 now. It's about spending and debts and deficit. We're at $14 trillion with the approval of the debt limit increase. It's going to be over 16, the greatest increase in the national debt in history. And it's about leadership. It's about what party believes in the American dream and American exceptionalism. And I think we're back in a period of malaise like Jimmy Carter. That's not what's going to win it.
All right, we're going to talk about the economy in just a moment. But as a comparison, do you worry, as a sitting governor, as chair of the Governors Association, that the National Republican Party is fielding candidates who will ultimately have to be too extreme and will lose the opportunity to retake the political center, which is how presidential campaigns are won?
No, because they're talking about jobs, spending, leadership, energy. They're talking about the kitchen table issues that people really care about. And so after this inter-squad scrimmage is done over the next 6, 7, 8 months, of course there'll be people beating each other up a little bit. But Republicans have a great desire to win, and they will rally around the candidate big time this year.
Let's talk about jobs. And for both of you, I want to point out a Wall Street Journal survey that was done from the Business Roundtable about hiring. I'll put it up on the screen. Top business executives are less confident now about the U.S. economic outlook and their ability to hire new workers than in previous quarters this year. Only 36% of CEOs thought their company's U.S. employment would increase in the next 6 months. 24% thought it would increase, or would decrease rather, and that's according to a survey of 140 CEOs done by the Business Roundtable. This goes on to point out that in the second quarter, the numbers were different. 51% thought they'd be hiring more. Only 11% thought it would decrease. The outlook is bleaker. What can and what should government do?
Well, let me just say that at home in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we're growing jobs faster than 44 other states. Our unemployment rate is well below the national average, as it is in Virginia, and going down. And we've moved up. We're chasing Virginia, which is first in the nation as best places to do business. We've moved up to 5th or 6th at this point. That's because we have a strategy, and it's a strategy about investing in education, in innovation, and in infrastructure. And frankly, that's exactly what the president's been talking about at the national level. That's what the stimulus bill has been about, and that's what the jobs bill accelerates. So I don't think that simply, this notion of that you hear sometimes from national Republicans of cutting spending, shrinking government, crushing unions, and waiting is a strategy that's going to get us anywhere. What we have to be about is a wise partnership, public and private, investing in our future.
All right, but as a governor, Matthew, I mean, what are the consequences of inaction? Because the reality is the president's campaigning for a jobs bill. The outlook is not very strong. So what are the consequences for doing nothing at the federal level?
David, if I just say, I think the consequences are dire. And I think they reflect terribly on the folks who say no to whatever the president puts forward. You know, we, in both of our respective states, if I may say, of Governor McDonnell, we have worked in partnership with people who differ from us politically because we understand that people look to us to help, not to solve every problem in everybody's life, but to help people help themselves. And we are all looking to the federal government that way. I think the president has shown over and over and over again, sometimes to the dismay of his supporters, that he's willing to reach across the
You hear Governor McDonnell from the president's advisors that the Republicans nationally have been diabolically successful in blaming all dysfunction in the government on the president and basically saying no to effectively everything. What are the consequences of inaction by the federal government to do something to jumpstart hiring?
Well, I don't buy that argument in the first place. I think that's a lack of leadership. Deval's right. When you're a governor, you got to balance budgets, get stuff done on time. You can't make excuses. You're held directly responsible for outcomes in your state. We can't do what the president's doing, which is blaming the House, blaming the Tea Party, calling the American people soft. I'd say we need stronger leadership. That's what's wrong. And so I think what you've got here is an administration that's very much anti-business. Look at this week. The president of Coke saying it's easier to do business in China than it is in America. The president of Google saying that all this regulation from Washington is stifling innovation. I don't think this is the right approach to be able to recapture the American dream. We ought to be more positive about what a great nation we've got, and I don't hear that from this White House.
I completely agree about the importance of being positive, and I think this president's patriotism is beyond, and enthusiasm about this country is beyond question. I think that we've been asking the president to fix the economy with one hand tied behind his back. We've been saying, in effect, make it so that government has no role in regulating excesses on Wall Street, in trying to assure that the multiple bottom lines that government is responsible for are adequately balanced, and that you should make investments, but we aren't going to give you any funds to do so.
But Deval, we did regulate Wall Street. Look at Dodd-Frank. It was passed on the president's watch, and now you got CEOs around the country saying that's one of the things that's killing our ability to invest. That's why there's capital and jobs on the sidelines.
Let me just jump in and talk about health care. We're not going to have this fight. The Supreme Court is likely to look at this now in the heat of the campaign year.
Yes.
Governor, you've been forceful in saying that you want to sue the federal government over this. You don't want this to become the law of Virginia or the law. You've already done that, excuse me. What's going to happen here? What's the impact of this look going to be?
Well, it's hard to say. The Virginia case, of course, we got bumped out on standing, so we're appealing to the United States Supreme Court, in fact, just this week on standing. The Florida case will probably be the likely one, I think, Deval, that'll get to the Supreme Court on the merits. And the fundamental question is, can the United States Congress force an individual in a state to buy a product or a good, and if not, to get fined? So regardless of what you think about health care, and I know they've got a plan in Massachusetts, all the merits, which the states can do. This is about whether the federal government can make an individual do it. I think there's broad agreement in the country that we need more access at less cost, but doing it through this one-size-fits-all federal mandate from Washington is not the way to go, and that's why the majority of the American people are against it, why it's going to be a big campaign issue.
Of course, you know, the national reform is based on what we've been doing in Massachusetts for the last 5 years, and 98% of our residents have health insurance. It's added 1% to state spending. It's been a wild success. There is a challenge everywhere in the country in terms of managing healthcare costs down, and that's regardless whether you have a universal system or not. We're going to crack that code in Massachusetts as well. I think that, frankly, to describe this, due respect to my friend Bob, to describe this as a mandate for one-size-fits-all is wrong. There is so much flexibility under this proposal to try different ways of accomplishing the same goal, and the goal is recognizing that health is a public good.
Let me come back to politics now, and I want to ask you about your fellow Governor Chris Christie up in New Jersey. So he was out at the Reagan Library this week. He quoted then-Senator Obama, the 2004 campaign, where he talked about one America, and used that against him, really, in his criticism. This is what Governor Christie